I work on a podcast for the Stanford Center on Longevity called Century Lives, and we're doing right now a special season called Century Lives: The Next 50. We talk to young people about how they see their next 50 years rolling out, often 50 years of work. We actually have a new episode coming out today with a water engineer who was part of the uncovering the Flint water crisis, a guy who's at UNC now called Siddhartha Roy. And every time I do one of these interviews and talk with one of these young people, I think, man, it would be great to be sort of starting out new and doing all the cool things they're doing. But in fact, it's actually quite a hard time for young workers entering the workforce right now. I mean, think about sort of the extraordinary upheavals and uncertainties of the pandemic, the Great Resignation, high inflation, economic risk, the pervasive sense of uncertainty that they see in light of global issues like climate change. So earlier this year, the Longevity Project, in partnership with Corebridge Financial, launched an effort to better understand the challenges that young workers face in planning for longer careers and longer retirement. So think about, as someone cited, John Chauvin, you can't fund a 30-year retirement on a 40-year career. What can you fund on a 60-year career? And perhaps a 30-year retirement on top of that. Our first findings actually came out last week in a paper we called Generation Care. This echoes a lot of the themes we've heard today about importance of caregiving, the importance of lifelong learning, the challenges that younger workers face in funding those. And we did focus groups and polling and interviews of experts to put in this paper. And I think it has a lot of insights, many of them have been touched on today. It also, like any good research paper, says there are a lot of questions to be asked for the next round. So some of those are what we want to dive in today. And I'm just pleased to be here with JoAnne and Sammy, because they're both great thinkers on this topic of younger workers, longer work careers, and the potential of longer retirements. Let me introduce both of them to you. JoAnne Moore is the Vice President of Thought Leadership and Strategic Content at Corebridge Financial. She collaborated with us, as I said, on the Generation Care report. And when I mean collaborated, I don't mean said good luck to you. Every day we talked together, thought together, and worked together on this project, a real partner in this effort. JoAnne has held senior thought leadership, research, and communication roles at a number of top financial service companies, and she's led groundbreaking studies on retirement, aging, longevity, the generations, and policy and legislation focused on improving financial well-being for American workers. Thanks for coming, JoAnne. And Sammy MacFarlane is the founder and CEO of Morrow, a company building wealth for America's workforce. Morrow has built an innovative approach to helping working Americans plan for retirement, with a special focus, and I think this is really interesting given the topics that we've talked about today, special focus on the estimated 70% of the workforce who don't necessarily have their own financial advisors, who rely on error-prone, do-it-yourself approach. Prior to founding Morrow last year, Sammy served as a founding team member and advisor to early-stage technology companies, including Nourished RX, Pando, Homebound, and Reach Labs. Thanks for coming, Sammy, as well.
Absolutely.
So let's start off with you, JoAnne. Talk a little bit about some of the things we found in the white paper,
Sure.
and the polling. So from your perspective, I wanted to ask you sort of what are the biggest challenges that young workers face now in planning for longer retirements? So we know some of the career challenges. What about thinking about sort of retirement 2080? As daunting as that sounds. Yeah, 60-year career.
I'd say one of the biggest challenges for the industry is making sure that they can grasp 2080 and retirement, because at a younger age, is this their biggest priority to be focusing on? So it's competing priorities. But to go back to some of the findings, I brought notes up, which I normally don't do. It's on. Is it not working? What's that?
Are we all soft? See, can you turn the volume up a little bit?
I need to put on my glasses for that.
First, I have to check on.
Is that better? Okay. So I was saying that I brought notes up, which I don't typically do, but my brain is so filled with everything I've been hearing. Yes, I'm like, I want to talk about that. I'm like, nope, that's not our topic. I want to talk, but just can't. So I'm just going to touch on some of the key findings that we found in this. And we fielded a survey Ken did focus groups and these expert interviews, and then we fielded a survey in the spring, and it actually was of individuals ages 25 to 75, and took a very deliberate view on the younger respondents to really pull out the findings related to them. And we found a few things: is that they do recognize they're going to need to work longer than their parents have or previous generations, and they don't want to. That is not something that is desirable to them. So that's an interesting thing to dive into, to really find out why is that and what is their perception of work. When I think about, I don't see myself ever retiring and not doing anything that I'm passionate about work related, that we may need to change a perception of what work is in that area. The second thing is they do not see themselves attaining the type of retirement their parents can or their grandparents have. And that they really do want some secure income opportunities for themselves beyond beyond Social Security as they get older. A top concern, which was really surprising to me, is caregiving. And I think a lot of this was precipitated by the pandemic and seeing all the care that was needed among family members. I would not have thought a 26-year-old would have selected caregiving as a primary concern of theirs, but it is. It absolutely is. And then I think the final one was what they said was what was very important or extremely important to them in planning for the future was opportunity for ongoing learning, training, curriculum, that because they know that their early education, their traditional education, is not going to sustain them for a 60-year career, and they're going to need more of that. So those are some of the things that were presented that to us when we looked into the data, and when we look at ways to solve this, it really does come down to how can we pull policy, industry, NGOs, academia together to come up with the right solutions to help what will look like a very different working world for this cohort. Is that?
Thank you. That's great. Thank
Sure.
you. So Sammy, what rings true? So I fell out of the category of younger workers quite a while ago. I think you're probably still in it. I know you are. What rings authentic to you in that description? What have you observed from your own work with younger workers and people thinking, especially working class workers, which is the focus of Morrow, right?
For sure. Well, I mean, I'll just start off a little bit of the company background. I mean, when I first started designing and thinking about the concept of Morrow, it was actually really focused on thinking about the needs of the pre-retiree, the person. How does the everyday person navigate the challenges of making that transition? You have a lot of things that you're doing for the first time. They're unfamiliar, they're scary, and people need guidance. Maybe they're unfamiliar things to you. But what we saw is across a broader spectrum, those things were known. They're repeated entities. And so we started doing that for people under this banner of retirement readiness. And as we worked with people, as we worked with companies, and that's what we do, our platform works through companies, we heard two things. One is people said, well, that's great. First of all, this is really working for me. I'm a 55-year-old. This is doing great. But can you help my 35-year-old? Because if you can't help my 35-year-old or my 25-year-old who's starting to think about some of these pressures and is something that they're elevating to us, then we don't really need three different solutions for our 60-year-old, our 40-year-old, and our 20-year-old. And so I think what's been fascinating is, especially right now, in a lot of the macro things that you've mentioned coming out of this period, there's a lot of uncertainty, especially amongst the younger generations, and so there's just a more general need for a higher level of guidance. People are feeling that pain in a way that younger generations are feeling that pain and that uncertainty in a way that it hadn't before.
So how do you persuade, or even should we try to persuade, a younger worker who's facing there's a long time before retirement, and there's going to be a lot of ups and downs between now and then that they have to worry about? How do you persuade them that it's smart to start saving for retirement now?
Well,
and if you could start with that, and JoAnne would love to play on.
Yeah, well, it's really hard. I mean, as humans, we have a difficulty seeing more than 10 years into the future, forecasting what that future looks like, and so it's hard as a 20-year-old to imagine what that 70-year-old life looks like. And so the best that we can do is we can equip our younger workers, first of all, from a just personal standpoint, passing along the stories. We've talked about intergenerational knowledge transfer, passing along to younger generations. Maybe it's a son, maybe it's a grandson, maybe it's a mentee, the importance of thinking about these things early. But I think the way we impart it is taking a longer run view. It's equipping, it's building the infrastructure through businesses to give people the tools that they need. I mean, there's no better solution than investing in your 401k. I mean, that is like the number one thing that we tell people, and it's a longer run game. So I think having embedding a lot of those supportive mechanisms within the company is a really good start.
Yeah, Sammy and I were talking about this at the table earlier. What are some of the barriers to action? Because we know there's a need for access to information and to services and tools. But even when people have that, they don't necessarily take action. So what is the barrier to that, and how can we overcome that? One way is there's some policy right now in Secure 2.0 that's up for voting on. There are some things that could really help some of our younger workers, which is automatic enrollment for newly hired individuals and automatic escalation in 401k and 403b plans. So that's requiring action, that they're going to have to actually say, I don't want it and I'll opt out. That should help. There's also legislation on the table that employers will do matching contributions for student loan payments. So if a new hire or a younger, actually any employee that has student loan debt, which is really pulling away from their ability to save for the future, they make that payment and the employer will put that amount of money into a retirement plan for them. And there's several other provisions in this legislation should it get voted upon. So I think some of the things that kind of force savings are going to be crucial. I think how we get past the barrier, though, of people wanting to take action for themselves is through the conversations that we're having with people. And this is, I think, essentially what you're saying as well, right? How are we talking to people about saving for the future? I did not save as much as I should have when I was in my 30s. I was a single parent, raising a child, single income household, and that was not my priority. I did not max out. I did save some, but I did not max it out. So how do we get people to understand the time value of money? And it's all going to be in the conversations and the storytelling, and you're the master storyteller.
But where does the rubber meet the road on these conversations? Is it, so you talked a little bit about employers and their sort of responsibilities or where they can take action. Is it the dinner table conversation? Is it schools, educational institution? Where does change really occur on all these things?
Yeah, I'll say that at every level of stakeholder, individuals, those conversations are great. They should happen. I think everyone in this room should feel challenged to have those conversations with people that they care about. At the corporate level, and I want to get to this a little bit more, companies adopting support structures that provide financial health for their employees. It's not a handout. It's something that actually really does benefit the employer. And so I think there's a push on that. The last thing on the government policy, I mean, this stuff's not taught in school, and it's crazy that it's not. The fact that basic law of compounding was never taught to me in school. I mean, what more valuable skill set or knowledge base could you have that is going to create value for you over the course of your life than knowing basic financial principles? And so I think at every level, there's steps that we can take and that we need to take. And so I'll pass to you.
No, I think right there, the literacy programs that can be shared at the high school level. And we have, as Corebridge, done quite a few of those with some different school districts, and are really looking at and testing and measuring understanding and awareness of high schoolers as they start the program, when they come out of the program, and then really leveraging that into the college years. But I also think it's the access that can be given through employers. I'm recognizing we're talking a lot about what employers can do, and that a lot of these workers will be gig workers and will be self-employed.
Yeah.
So I think that is another thing. I can't say I have an answer to that, but hopefully these are the conversations that will really help drive how do we get action and information to this group of gig workers and self-employed workers so that they can begin saving for the future.
Sammy, so you talked about saving for the future, and saving for the future is, we mostly think about it as a retirement, but there's other things to save for. There's caregiving costs. We talked about there's lifelong learning costs. There is what I think Donald Rumsfeld called the known unknowns, that something will happen, you just don't know what it is, emergencies of life. I'm curious, Sammy, when you think about the Morrow solution, maybe in the future, either today or in the future, do you think about helping people save just for retirement? Is that your focus, or also help them save, because they must be interrelated, for the other challenges of life?
they're all interrelated, and that's why a holistic approach is so important to have financial health in the future. You need to be thinking about what are the different building blocks of that, and every single, they're different. People go through different life chapters, and those life chapters have different financial needs. And I think that the way we engage people at an early age is to meet them where they are on those financial topics. And if we can address those burning needs that they have, for a young person, it might be, how do I get out of student debt? I have a bunch of student debt. Or how do I roll into my 401k? I mean, that's one that we get. That's like our number one question that we get when we work with employees. So understanding at each different chapter, what are those pain points? And then once we engage on those levels, we can help them see around the next corner. So you migrate from life chapter 1 to the next life chapter, you might be looking to buy a home. Well, that's a whole different bag of different needs and different pieces of knowledge that are the average person doesn't know. But so I think, to answer your question back to engagement, it's really, what are those topical things at the moment, and then it's a journey from there on out.
So let me just follow up on a second. So I think I've read a variety of sort of a different description of the same statistic, which is the average American worker doesn't have enough savings for, I forget what the numbers, if their car breaks down, they don't have a way of funding
emergency savings.
So if that is the real life of everyone, of most people, how do you actually convince them that saving for retirement is important when, and actually I'll buy that it is, they need to save for the things of tomorrow rather than 80 years from now? I'd love it if both of you would sort of think about aloud about sort of that big global challenge.
Sure. And we actually did a survey last January on American emergency fund needs in American workers, where we surveyed about, I'd say about 1,500 American workers, a variety of age, to understand how much emergency fund needs or unexpected expenses can derail them, and quite a bit. And these expenses do come up quite often. I mean, I tell the story, I had a tree fall in my backyard, and I had different people come in and give quotes to take it away. And it was between $1,000 and $2,000 to just cut up a tree that had already fallen. Like they didn't even need to cut it down, and they were going to roll it into the woods. And it was pretty crazy. I'm like, it can stay there for a while. That's fine. But what we did find was that not having emergency funds, not having access to immediate savings for immediate needs does keep people from putting money away. There is legislation, again, on the table that could allow workers access to up to $1,000 a year penalty-free for an emergency need. And they can take that out every year. They have to pay it back, but they can take it out. They do not have to prove need. And we went a little bit deeper and said, if you did know that you could access these funds, would you be more inclined to save? 3 out of 4 of those who are already saving in retirement plans said they would absolutely increase the rate that they save. And those who have access to plans but have not begun saving said they would begin, because just having that knowledge that they could tap it should they need it could really incent and drive them to save more for the future, which just shows us the worry for today keeps them from planning for tomorrow.
Okay. So the theory of that legislation is the fear of not having access to your retirement money keeps you from actually investing for retirement. So
or needing something today. If I'm going to put that money away, what if I need it for the fallen tree or the broken down car? And that people in this research, I won't quote it all, but we have examples of all the different things people are not paying for, going to doctors, getting prescriptions because they don't have funds for something that comes up unexpectedly.
So Sammy, I'm curious. I think you're unusual in the sense that you focused on the part of the marketplace which is has less money for retirement. So it's almost sort of a counterintuitive thing. Like, don't go where the money is. You're not robbing the bank. I don't know. I'm going with that. But I think there's something about John Dillinger in there. What have you learned? I mean, so that's this is still a relatively new company. What have you learned about that cohort and how to help them?
Yeah, what we learned is, JoAnne and I were talking about it. There's, the access piece, and then there's the engagement piece. And the access piece is thinking creatively about new business models. How can you deliver financial access to the 70% of Americans that are doing it on a do-it-yourself basis? I mean, for starters, that's really scary to think about that that's the case. I mean, how can we ever hope to have a society that's financially stable if people are more or less guessing? But so the financial access piece is thinking about who are the stakeholders in the system? If we can accept the fact that your average blue collar or skilled labor can't afford a financial advisor, which that is the case. So what are other ways so the way that we've thought about it is, let's design a financial health platform that can drive value to the employer, that is going to satisfy their employees' needs on the financial stresses they have. It's going to improve retention. It's going to improve productivity, so that the employer entity is paying for that. And then there are also examples where, if Ken, you come to me and we figured out that you'd really be a good candidate for a life insurance policy, or you don't have a trust or a will, and I can say, hey, you know what? I understand your situation really well. I've got 3 or 4 different vendors who I think would be really good solutions for you to close the loop. Let me introduce you to JoAnne at Corebridge. Let me introduce you to a few others, so that we're not only surfacing problems, we're actually closing loops. And that's part of the activation piece, where it's like, it's one thing to hand people problems. If you can understand them, meet them where they are, and then drive them to the solutions, empower them to make those decisions, that's a way that it's a path that we're taking.
So JoAnne, so we're talking about macro questions. Let's talk about an important micro one. So you have a daughter coming out of college pretty soon.
In May.
So that's really soon. How do you talk to her about financial planning for the future? Is that something she's willing to listen to? I have a 15-year-old son, which is a different stage of life, but I have a hard time convincing him to plan to take a shower. So so I'm really curious about how you manage that.
It's been interesting. Money is a very interesting conversation between the two of us. But we do talk about it. I want her to understand better how money works, and she's very good at spending it and finds very creative ways to do so. But it's funny, this year, for the first time, she's got a pretty good internship, and she's like, I want to take on paying some of my bills. I'm like, that sounds fabulous. And boy, is she getting a real world look at what that means, living in DC and trying to navigate the cost of being a student in DC. It's very expensive. I think it's going to be very interesting when she graduates, where she goes, and how she kind of just starts to really feel out what it means to have a job and to pay bills and to deal with all that. She's looking at the Peace Corps, so she's looking at that as a way to maybe not have to deal with the bills and everything for a couple. I mean, among other reasons, but but yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors there. I think it's hard sometimes to teach your own children certain things. I need other people to. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but if you can get somebody else,
I'll hazard everyone has experienced that.
I could say something, but if she hears it from somebody else, it's a fabulous idea. So I have gotten much better at asking friends that she respects and other folks to have conversations with her.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question, Bassar. What are family dinner conversations like, and who actually influences?
They're really important conversations to have, but they can also be very sensitive. I mean, my mother was visiting for Thanksgiving, and my brother brought up will and estate, and then he ends up talking to my sisters, and she's like, why is he asking these questions? And it can get a little touchy talking about money amongst family. So really the conversations are crucial, but finding the right people to have them and pulling them in.
So Sammy, you're a decade on from, roughly speaking, from JoAnne's daughter. I'm curious about your cohort. Do people talk about things like retirement? I don't think I did at that age.
I wouldn't say that that's a dinner table conversation amongst most of my friends, but whether,
hey, get me a beer and what's going on with your 401k?
Do you talk about longevity though? Do you talk about how long you'll live?
For sure. I mean, and that's why this is a beautiful gathering here, because it's so interdisciplinary. And so the health component and the diet component and the financial component, I think that I know that whether it's talked about or not, everyone in my cohort has those financial needs that are causing duress, they're causing stress. They're not surfaced, kind of what you were saying, JoAnne. I mean, you really have to find the right platform to bring up those conversations. But everyone's feeling it. Everyone's feeling it, some sort of financial angst. And we all feel like we're sort of alone in it. Like, oh, rent's tight or, whatever it might be, we feel like we're doing it alone. But the truth is there are problems that have been solved before. There's places to get guidance. And so seeking that out is essential.
So money is still, I take it, sort of one of the great taboos of American culture. Talking about that just doesn't happen.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Well, we won't have a taboo in this room. I'd love to get questions. If there are any from the online audience, why don't we start there?
Sure. So the online audience is curious about
Are they loving this conversation too, like they loved the last one?
Yes, they
Okay.
are.
All right.
Loving
Thank you
it.
for making no. Are they loving it more? No, I don't know.
Marginally more, yes.
Okay.
So one of the online audience members says that the NIH performed a study a few years ago where they used age progression software to help younger workers visualize their older selves.
Wow.
And they're curious about, aside from that tactic, how can we help improve engagement amongst younger employees in regards to saving for their futures, and especially helping them understand the financial implications of caregiving for their elders.
Okay, so there are actually a bunch of questions in there. It's a great question, set of questions. What do you all think? I mean, either the sort of the caregiving piece of it, which I think is more on people's mind than we would imagine, or sort of the how do you help them imagine what a half century forward looks like.
Well, I think one thing's true, which is especially coming out of the pandemic, a lot of younger generations that have become caregivers have seen the good and the bad of what it looks like to grow older, and that I think in a different way allows for people to relate to kind of what decisions they might want to make or not want to make to set themselves up for success. And so I think that that's something that we've heard from a lot of younger individuals, that seeing their loved ones grow older and what how to set themselves up again for success.
I want to touch on the first part of that, which I think is really interesting. How do we get younger people to visualize and to really own something by seeing it happen? And I don't have an answer to this, but it immediately brought me back to thinking about what Alice Waters spoke of yesterday with the gardens that are being developed at schools that younger people are working on and developing. Is there an equivalent of that we can do in financial education and awareness to get students, school, high school, college, really involved in building something that they see the effect of money over time and how it can affect them? So there could be something there. I don't know that it's a garden.
A money garden?
Yeah, money trees, sure. Everybody needs a money tree. That's the answer.
All right, question? Yes.
Yeah, so you're talking about maxing out 401ks. I recently, for people not doing that, have you ever considered that maybe young people just assume that any money you give to these people is just getting gambled away?
So lack of confidence in the system?
Yeah.
That would never happen. I mean, we've never heard of a company imploding with other people's money. So it is actually a really legitimate question about trust in institutions. And that was something that actually came out in the survey, right?
Yeah.
A little bit about lack of faith.
Yeah. So I think it was lack of confidence, not just in the financial systems, but lack of confidence. What is the future going to be like in general for all of us? So there is definitely concern among that, amongst this cohort. I think that comes back to education and the conversations, absolutely, and diversification. Early on in my career, I worked for an employer where I had my entire 401k invested in the company's stock, and I thought that was a brilliant idea. And somebody explained to me that was like the stupidest thing I could do, because not only was I employed by this person and had my 401k with them, I then had all the assets within the 401k. So every single financial point of my life was in one area. So I do think it's through the education, and it wasn't a financial advisor said this to me, it was a friend, something along those lines, is to help people get the confidence in that, and to make sure that they are diversified.
And can I just say really quick, because we talked about the different stakeholders, and on the corporate side, I think that's that data point is one that I picked up from the white paper. there is sort of a dwindling lack of trust in institutions and
Mhm.
companies. That's an opportunity for companies, because if you can go work for a company that provides financial health, and they are providing the benefits that help you live overall more healthy and wealthy lives, that's a huge differentiator for the competition and a lot of the other companies that might be vying for you. So I think, that's that while that is true, that turns up the dial for companies to see that as an opportunity for separation.
Great. I made the mistake of coming up here without the agenda. So I've actually lost sense of what is next. Is it?
A conversation with Maria
Is
Schreiber.
Maria on the line?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So is someone checking with her to find her?
You still have 8 minutes.
I do have 8 minutes. Oh, the clock says I'm 30 seconds over time. Fantastic. Good. Maria's got tons of time. Okay. All right.
Want to split the difference?
All right. So let's ask, are there any other questions? Yes, sir. Can someone be in touch with Maria? Yes,
Got
please
it.
go ahead.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's so interesting to hear these perspectives. I really love it. And with innovation, decade after decade, for more than a century, there are systematically excluded populations, racial, ethnic minorities, women. We could go down the list. So I'm just wondering, when you're thinking about innovation, how are you applying an inclusive lens to ensure that access to building wealth is for everyone?
I look right. We both look at Sammy.
Yeah, I mean, the way we're doing it is, by serving the populations that we are, by working through blue collar employees. The folks that we work with have never had the opportunity to work with a personal financial planner, and that's a huge win for them. They love it, the fact that they could have someone that's in their corner, that's empowering them, that's encouraging them to make the right decisions. That's the motivation that people need. People need hope. People need just a little bit of push, and it's amazing what happens when you have someone in your corner that is an advocate for you.
Yeah, and I want to jump on that too, because I think it's going to happen by us all collaborating. The underserved populations. I'm going to point to Ramsey's organization, National Council on Aging, does a really strong focus on gaps, wealth gaps, gender, ethnicity, the whole 9 yards. So it's really going to be a Corebridge working with an NCOA to really delve into the core challenges, the core causes of these challenges, and then be able to address how we can fix these, which is often access to education, access to the jobs that will help you get paid, and how do we really just talk about it a lot more and make it a mainstream conversation so that we can address the challenges.
All right, great question. We'll take one last question if there is one. Yes, sir. You in the corner. I don't think the mic's on. Yeah.
We can hear you. We can repeat the question.
Yeah, we'll give you a working mic. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm curious to how universal basic income fits in. 5 years ago, we all thought AI was going to automate a lot of the routine jobs. What's happened this year, we think a lot of the creative jobs would probably be automated before the routine jobs, right? Things are changing really fast. And we're thinking of 4-day work days instead of 5-day work days. There's all of this automation in this picture. So when you think of retirement 20, 30, 40 years away, how do you think of universal basic income? Just a thought on where the government fits into all this.
So let me ask you, JoAnne, because one of the things that people asked about was the need for guaranteed income. And now that they may have been thinking about it in the context of privately created guaranteed income, but here's a question about government-funded guaranteed income and the importance of that.
Well, yeah. It's an interesting question because it doesn't exactly tie into it, but we did see that the top concern with these younger workers for the future is having a stream of income for life outside of Social Security. our organization, Corebridge Financial, that's what we do, is provide products that allow that through annuities, guaranteed lifetime income. And how do we give people access to that? There is a push more and more to allow access to these types of products through employer plans. The products are out there to do this. What isn't is an understanding of how they work. So there's a fear and a lack of confidence, and that's the bridge that we need to get over, is helping people understand them. There are many products out there for many different situations. So it's a matter of talking to people and getting that information out there. I don't know if that answers the question exactly, if you were talking more about from an employment standpoint. But
Well, I think we'll have to leave it
Stop it
there.
there.
Yes, because we're over time, and
Got
actually, I
it.
think Maria's here. So really appreciate both of you being here. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
yeah, thanks for having
Absolutely.
us.
Thank you.